أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. To our Muslim brethren in South Africa, the United States, and around the world, Ramadan Mubarak. Today, on this first Sunday of the blessed month of Ramadan, the month of fasting and prayer, the month of internal jihad fi sabilillah, we have a very special abbreviated broadcast on the following topic, the 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history. This is a thought-provoking treatise by someone by the name of Michael Hart, Professor Michael Hart. Without any further ado, especially given the fact that this is an abbreviated broadcast today, we want to get right into the substance. You know, the month of Ramadan is a month that, given the size of the Muslim Ummah, is a month of a special month of observance within the Islamic calendar that practically everyone in the globe, on the globe, I should say, and especially if you reside in large swaths of metropolitan areas and different parts of the world, you are very much aware of. This month of Ramadan signifies one of the principles of Islam. You know, there are 5 principles: to believe that there is no God but Allah and that Mohamed is his messenger. That's principle number 1. Second principle is to believe in prayer at least 5 times a day. The third is to believe in giving zakat or charity to those who are in need. And, you know, the fourth is fasting, especially in the holy month of Ramadan, which is the month we are in right now. And then the fifth, of course, is making the pilgrimage to the house, to the first house established for the worship of Almighty God, Allah, at least once in your lifetime if you're able to do so. So we are now engulfed by the grace and mercy of Allah in this principle of fasting, and also the principle of prayer. There is heightened involvement on the part of committed Muslims in praying throughout this month, you know, supplicating our Lord at various times throughout the day and into the night. And the goal, of course, is, you know, this internal jihad, this internal struggle to make us better Muslims, better human beings, better examples of this one-of-a-kind world-class deen called Islam, better exemplars for the rest of our fellow human beings. As the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was an example for all of humanity, we are to be an example as well, to the best of our ability. This month of sacrifice, of prayer, of heightened spirituality on so many fronts, it helps us to get closer to what we're supposed to be as Muslims. Professor Michael Hart wrote a book titled The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history. And given the fact that Mr. Hart is not Muslim himself, I know that it came as a surprise when this book came out. I think it was back in the late 70s. And it's a big book. Came as a shock and a surprise to many that he ranked as number one, the most influential person in the world, in history, the Prophet Mohammed ibn Abdullah. Peace and blessings be upon him. So I just want to share with you what he wrote in this book titled The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history. He begins, "My choice of Muhammad to lead the list of the world's most influential persons may surprise some readers and may be questioned by others. But he was the only man in history who was supremely successful on both the religious and secular levels. Of humble origins, Muhammad founded and promulgated one of the world's great religions and became an immensely effective political leader. Today, 13 centuries after his death, now 14 centuries after his death, his influence is still powerful and pervasive. The majority of the persons in this book had the advantage of being born and raised in centers of civilization, highly cultured or politically pivotal nations. Muhammad, however, was born in the year 570 in the city of Mecca in southern Arabia, at that time a backward area of the world, far from the centers of trade, art, and learning. Orphaned at age 6, he was reared in modest surroundings. Islamic tradition tells us that he was illiterate. His economic position improved when, at the age of 25, he married a wealthy widow. Nevertheless, as he approached 40, there was little outward indication that he was a remarkable person. Now, there are those, of course, who would beg to differ with that, because even before his prophethood, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace and blessings be upon him, stood out from the rest of the population of that Arabian part of that part of the Arabian Peninsula. He stood out among the various tribes of Mecca. He had a very moral and ethical and admirable personality, according to the historical narratives that we've read. But Mr. Hart goes on to say, most Arabs at that time were pagans and believed in many gods. There were, however, in Mecca a small number of Jews and Christians. It was from them, most probably, that Muhammad first learned of a single omnipotent God who ruled the entire universe. When he was 40 years old, Muhammad became convinced that this one true God, Allah, was speaking to him through the archangel Gabriel and had chosen him to spread the true faith. For 3 years, Muhammad preached only to close friends and associates. Then, about 613, he began preaching in public. As he slowly gained converts, the Meccan authorities came to consider him a dangerous nuisance. In 622, fearing for his safety, Muhammad fled to Medina, a city some 200 miles north of Mecca, where he had been offered a position of considerable political power. This flight, called the Hijrah, was the turning point of the Prophet's life. In Mecca, he had had few followers. In Medina, he had many more, and he soon acquired an influence that made him virtually an absolute ruler. During the next few years, while Muhammad's following grew rapidly, a series of battles were fought between Medina and Mecca. This war ended in 630 with Muhammad's triumphant return to Mecca as a conqueror. The remaining 2.5 years of his life witnessed the rapid conversion of the Arab tribes to the new religion. When Muhammad died in 632, he was the effective ruler of all of southern Arabia. The Bedouin tribesmen of Arabia had a reputation as fierce warriors, but their number was small and plagued by disunity and internecine warfare. They had been no match for the larger armies of the kingdoms of the settled agricultural areas to the north. However, unified by Muhammad for the first time in history, and inspired by their fervent belief in the one true God, these small Arab armies now embarked upon one of the most astonishing series of conquests in human history. To the northeast of Arabia lay the large Neo-Persian Empire of the Sassanids. To the northwest lay the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople. Numerically, the Arabs were no match for their opponents. On the field of battle, though, it was far different, and the inspired Arabs rapidly conquered all of Mesopotamia, Syria, and Palestine. By 642, Egypt had been wrested from the Byzantine Empire, while the Persian armies had been crushed at the key battles of Qadisiyah in 637 and Nehaven in 642. But even these enormous conquests, which were made under the leadership of Muhammad's close friends and immediate successors, Abu Bakr and Umar ibn al-Khattab, did not mark the end of the Arab advance. By 711, the Arab armies had swept completely across North Africa to the Atlantic Ocean. There they turned north and, crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, overwhelmed the Visigothic kingdoms in Spain. For a while, it must have seemed that the Muslims would overwhelm all of Christian Europe. However, in 732, at the famous Battle of Tours, a Muslim army which had advanced into the center of France was at last defeated by the Franks. Nevertheless, in a scant century of fighting, these Bedouin tribesmen, inspired by the word of the Prophet, had carved out an empire stretching from the borders of India to the Atlantic Ocean, the largest empire that the world had yet seen. And everywhere that the armies conquered, large-scale conversions to the new faith eventually followed. Now, not all of these conquests proved permanent. The Persians, though they have remained faithful to the religion of the Prophet, have since regained their independence from the Arabs. And in Spain, more than 7 centuries of warfare finally resulted in the Christians reconquering the entire peninsula. However, Mesopotamia and Egypt, the two cradles of ancient civilization, have remained Arab, as have the entire coast of North Africa. The new religion, of course, continued to spread in the intervening centuries, far beyond the borders of the original Muslim conquests. Currently, it has tens of millions of adherents in Africa and Central Asia, and even more in Pakistan and northern India and in Indonesia. In Indonesia, the new faith has been a unifying factor. In the Indian subcontinent, however, the conflict between Muslims and Hindus is still a major obstacle to unity. How then is one to assess the overall impact of Muhammad on human history? Like all religions, Islam exerts an enormous influence upon the lives of its followers. It is for this reason that the founders of the world's great religions all figure prominently in this book. Since there are roughly twice as many Christians as Muslims in the world, it may initially seem strange that, subhanallah, wait, we got cut off here. Wait a minute. It may seem strange. Okay, I'm going to have to, subhanallah, I'm going to have to go to my book. What I did was, because of my vision challenges, I tried to copy as much of that as I could. I thought I had it all, so that I wouldn't have to rely on the book and my vision. This very small print. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll get through it. Let's see. Okay. All right. In Indonesia, the new faith has been a unifying factor. In the Indian subcontinent, however, the conflict between Muslims and Hindus is still a major obstacle to unity. How then is one to assess the overall impact of Muhammad on human history? Like all religions, Islam exerts an enormous influence upon the lives of its followers. It is for this reason that the founders of the world's great religions all figure prominently in this book. Since there are roughly twice as many Christians as Muslims in the world, it may initially seem strange that Muhammad has been ranked higher than Jesus. There are two principal reasons for that decision. First, Muhammad played a far more important role in the development of Islam than Jesus did in the development of Christianity. This is a very important point. Although Jesus was responsible for the main ethical and moral precepts of Christianity, insofar as these differed from Judaism, St. Paul was the main developer of Christian theology, its principal proselytizer, and the author of a large portion of the New Testament. Muhammad, however, was responsible for both the theology of Islam and its main ethical and moral principles. In addition, he played the key role in proselytizing the new faith and in establishing the religious practices of Islam. Moreover, he is the author of the Muslim holy scriptures, the Quran, a collection of certain of Muhammad's insights that he believed had been directly revealed to him by Allah. Most of these utterances were copied more or less faithfully during Muhammad's lifetime and were collected together in authoritative form not long after his death. The Quran, therefore, closely represents Muhammad's ideas and teachings to a considerable extent. His exact words, excuse me, no such detailed compilation of the teachings of Christ has survived. Now, let me just state for the record here, as a moment of clarity. I give Professor Hart a lot of credit for how honest he was in his research and the delivery of this research. But as a point of clarification, historians of religion, those who have been as honest as Professor Hart, have conceded the fact that the Quran today, it is the only book of religion that is as it was when it left the mouth of the Prophet Muhammad. It is pristine pure. And this is one of the miracles of the Quran. This is one of the miracles of Islam. This is what gives the Muslim ummah the ability for renewal. When there is a collapse, when there is a fall, when there is a retreat in the spirituality of Muslims in different parts of the world, it's like the ocean. It recedes and then it comes back again. And it's because of the purity, the power and the purity of the Quran as it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Again, he wrote, Professor Hart wrote, most of these utterances were copied more or less faithfully during Muhammad's lifetime. The Quran, therefore, closely represents Muhammad's ideas and teachings, and to a considerable extent, his exact words. No such detailed compilation of the teachings of Christ has survived. Since the Quran is at least as important to Muslims as the Bible is to Christians, the influence of Muhammad through the medium of the Quran has been enormous. It is probable that the relative influence of Muhammad on Islam has been larger than the combined influence of Jesus Christ and St. Paul on Christianity. On the purely religious level, then, it seems likely that Muhammad has been as influential in human history as Jesus. Furthermore, Muhammad, unlike Jesus, was a secular as well as a religious leader. In fact, as the driving force behind the Arab conquests, he may well rank as the most influential political leader of all time. Of many important historical events, one might say that they were inevitable and would have occurred even without the particular political leader who guided them. For example, the South American colonies would probably have won their independence from Spain, even if Simon Bolivar had never lived. But this cannot be said of the Arab conquests. Nothing similar had occurred before Muhammad, and there is no reason to believe that the conquests would have been achieved without him. The only comparable conquests in human history are those of the Mongols in the 13th century, which were primarily due to the influence of Genghis Khan. These conquests, however, though more extensive than those of the Arabs, did not prove permanent. And today, the only areas occupied by the Mongols are those that they held prior to the time of Genghis Khan. It is far different with the conquest of the Arabs. From Iraq to Morocco, there extends a whole chain of Arab nations united by language, history, and culture. The centrality of the Quran in the Muslim religion and the fact that it is written in Arabic have probably prevented the Arab language from breaking up into mutually unintelligible dialects, which might have otherwise occurred in the intervening 13 centuries. Differences and divisions between these Arab states exist, of course, and they are considerable. But the partial disunity should not blind us to the important elements of unity that have continued to exist. For instance, neither Iran nor Indonesia, both oil-producing states and both Islamic in religion, joined in the oil embargo of the winter of 1973 through 74. It is no coincidence that all of the Arab states and only the Arab states participated in the embargo. We see then that the Arab conquests of the 7th century have continued to play an important role in human history, down to the present day. It is the unparalleled combination of secular and religious influence, which I feel entitles Mohammed to be considered the most influential single figure in human history. And I will stop there and note that while because of the special programming that Salam Media is featuring, as it does each year on its network, this final broadcast in the series of broadcasts, the lineup of broadcasts on Sunday has to be shortened. But inshallah ta'ala, God willing, we will make it short and sweet. We had the reading of this thought-provoking treatise today, the first chapter in it, the ranking of the #1 most influential person in history, according to Michael Hart. And I'm sure that there are countless folk around the world, both Muslim and non-Muslim, who would agree with him. Next week, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to have our good brother, thought-provoking scholar, Dr. Tariq Ramadan, with us. He is going to expound upon what the month of Ramadan means to him. And inshallah ta'ala, we might have a little bit of time to explore some of the other challenging things that are taking place in different parts of the globe, not the least of which in France, involving our Muslim brethren and the naked, muscular, militarized bigotry that is emanating from certain quarters of that government and socio-political establishment. So with that, we close as we normally do with Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.